Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday, October 16th, 2017, and it's a birthday. Happy birthday to Ann Waldman, our newest addition to the family, and congratulations to the parents. My youngest brother, Lewis. So thanks very much for, being born. Appreciate it. Thanks for coming by. My second niece. There are very few girls in my family, as I told you the other day, so congratulations on that one. Born 2:20 in the morning, well before airtime, of course, so I got to find out the good news this morning, sharing it with everybody, and happy to be able to announce that new event. I don't know, there's not much else to say at this point except congratulations. Nobody's hearing it because they're all exhausted. Anybody who was on hand for the birth is, I'm sure, asleep by now. But when you wake up, congratulations. They're not joining us for the show this morning. Not a fan of politics yet at this point. Just a couple of hours old. But Trump is already ruining your world. I don't want to be a downer or anything, but it's true. Daily Co's Radio is live now. And as Bill reminds everybody all the way from Portland, Maine, it's a new week. And Kagro X, that's me, David Waldman. Hi, host of your show. Hits the floor running if we still have one. Yes, you should be enjoying today's show. Short notice on getting some work done today with our show brings you 100% more tile floor demolition sound effects than any of our leading competitor podcasts. Try that one, Chapo Trap House. I doubt you'll be able to match it. We could have tried to pre-record the show, could have gone with a rerun, but we don't do that here because I forgot. I didn't really think about what we were doing, and I didn't want to tell, I really didn't want to tell Greg Dworkin that we couldn't do a show today because he hates missing Mondays. He hates missing any day, and we hate rounding up the news without him. We'll see about what we're going to do tomorrow. I think most of the noise will be over. And there's some vacuuming, some knocking around going on, maybe some tile saws going later on today. Most of the really noisy demolition is over with, thankfully, and we can proceed. I think there's a little bit of vacuum drone going on in the background, but that's considerably better than it was before. And if you don't mind, look, life goes on here. We don't have a studio. You can help us, I guess, if you all donated like $1,000. We could get a studio, but that would require my leaving the house. I don't think I have any room to build it in this one, so not likely to happen. This is realism here. I don't know. Some of the most popular political videos on YouTube. We hinted a little bit at the takeover of YouTube or the successful manipulation of YouTube by the alt-right and wacko right here in the United States. And they don't mind recording in their basement or at their breakfast table or while they're driving their cars. So maybe this hint of realism will help us take over the political world. I don't know. I'm not certain how this all works. I don't know how any of this works anymore because, what can I tell you? You got political operatives who sit at the top of the food chain in American politics today who are white nationalists. You got a president golfing 5 out of the last 9 days while running for office, criticizing the previous president bitterly for the amount of time he spent on the golf course. And you got him on the golf course while the bodies of soldiers killed overseas are arriving at Dover Air Force Base, and nobody seems to give a damn. So I don't know. All the rules are out the window. So why can't I have tile demolition going on in the background? I say. So that's my addition to politics today. We're just going to. Tomorrow's show is in a wood chipper. That's what we're going to do, just for some variety. Good morning, Greg. Any either intruders in your home or noise otherwise?
Well, yes, we do have some intruders, so I'm going to contribute to the sound effects Excellent. As well.
Okay. If you need to do a little laundry, by all means. Go ahead.
We got rid of the laundry problem, and of course the The phone is in the washing machine where it belongs, so it doesn't make too much noise for us.
Okay, I put mine in
But
the
I'm
freezer.
doing what parents do. I'm boarding my son's dog while he travels. So Princess Puppy is going to be attacking Abby during the show.
That can only
because
mean
that's
good
what she
things.
does, you know. And so you're going to get dog effects, sound effects too, in addition to the floor. Of course,
Yes.
we understand this whole floor concept, right? Because Trump's polling has a ceiling but no floor,
Right.
and
Okay,
you're just trying to catch up and make it happen. To
Trying to
Kagro
dig a
World
bigger hole
Headquarters.
for him. That's what the show's about.
Yeah.
Make the biggest hole I can and push him in.
If you have no room in the house, we can put the studio on the roof.
I'll talk to the homeowners association about that.
Make it solar powered. At
Yeah.
least,
I might be able to
some
get
of
away
the
with that. We'll give it a try. Oh, are you silenced there?
I don't know.
Okay,
Can you
there
hear
you
me?
go. All right, yep, you're back now. Okay.
All right. Well, I wasn't really silenced. I actually shut up to let you talk, which is highly unusual for the show. So
I thought you were stunned into silence, maybe.
that's right. Absolutely. So basically, this morning's roundup is going to fit the whole theme of floor tile here because it's chaos.
We've got a lot of that.
We elected chaos and we got chaos. That's my headline over at the Pundit Roundup. And of course, we told you this back in January when we told you that what we were doing is electing a chaos agent. And he's proven us right.
Yes. Well, he's quite the agent.
In fact, so much that there's actually an AP headline here. Trump embraces turmoil as strategy. Unable or unwilling to completely erase his predecessor's signature initiatives, President Donald Trump this week turned to another approach, wreaking havoc. His back-to-back body blows against Obama's healthcare law and nuclear agreement with Iran demonstrated the president's embrace of turmoil as strategy. In both cases, he plunged a pair of policies with broad domestic and international implications into a state of confusion and uncertainty, hoping that the disorder will force Congress to take action.
All right.
So we're going to delve into this a little bit more detail. I have a piece here from Josh Marshall that he put up this morning, which I think is pretty good. It's a description of Trump. He's a pretty good Trump watcher. It's called, "For Me to Win, You Have to Lose."
That sounds familiar.
In every deal, he has to win, and you have to lose. That's how it works. It actually goes a bit deeper. He doesn't know he's won until you lose.
Okay.
And Josh says, a couple of days ago, TPM reader DM, we love readers who send us stuff. Send me a post from the real estate economics blog, Calculated Risk. It covers the same ground, but placed it in a business school conceptual framework. Here's the key passage. In general, there are two types of negotiations. There's the win-lose type, or distributive negotiation, where one party receives more and the other party receives less. This is the common approach when buying a car or real estate, haggling in a street market. The other type of negotiation is a win-win or integrative negotiation. This type is used when negotiating between, let's say, a company and a workers' union, with long-term suppliers, negotiating agreements between international allies, and even with adversaries. The tactics are very different. In the first type, win-lose, bluffing, threats, like threatening to walk away, even lying, are commonly used. Sound familiar?
Yes.
The approach to an integrative negotiation includes building trust, understanding the other party's concerns, knowing the details of the agreement with the goal to reach a mutually beneficial agreement. So basically, Obama did integrative negotiation and Trump does distributive negotiation. That's the difference between them. Okay. And when Trump says he's a great deal maker, what he really means is he can figure out a way to cheat so that he gets more and you get less.
Yes.
And that's why, he has all his events at his hotels and he charges the Secret Service for golf carts and all that other stuff.
And by the way, be careful of having your events at hotels in the age of Harvey Weinstein.
Well, yeah. So this is not the only example, but the whole idea of Trump's focus on bilateral agreements and his contempt for multilateral treaties and agreements is that a bilateral agreement allows him to negotiate the way he likes, which is win-lose. And multilateral agreements are, by their very definition, the other kind of negotiating that he can't stand.
Because he can't do it. He doesn't know how. Right.
He hasn't the clue. And so both abroad and with Congress, we can see clearly what should have been clear in advance. Trump has no idea how to negotiate international accords or treaties, or how to pass laws. These require building coalitions and trust because you'll need to work with the same actors again in the future. That's Marshall. And what I'm saying is that his whole idea here is to screw you and scam you without any thought that you might have to go next week and do something else, and that this is going to be true for 4 years. He's used to everybody walking away and then finding different suckers.
Yeah.
And then when he runs out of Americans, he'll start dealing with international folks, which is to say Russian mafia and stuff. But he can't do that with Congress. You can't just turn around and say, okay, I've scammed all I can. I've gotten all I can out of this Congress. Now I have to take some other Congress to the bank. It doesn't work that way.
No, although I might put out the warning, it's hard to get away multiple times with scamming mobsters.
Eventually, ask Manafort. Eventually it catches up.
Yeah, and it hasn't even really caught up with him the way it typically does. Luckily, they're high-profile guys, and it's also hard to murder and disappear them. So they got that going for them, which is nice.
Yeah, well, a lot of them get murdered and disappeared too.
True, they do. That's sort of a cost of doing business.
Yeah, as they say, it's the price of freedom, as Rick Perry put it.
That's true. And who knows more about freedom than Russian mobsters?
Absolutely. So here's a piece from Greg Sargent on October 10th. As Trump implodes, he threatens to hurt millions out of pure rage and spite. That is to say, being forced into this integrative kind of negotiation, he gets angry because he can't win at it. He doesn't understand it, so he lashes out. And what Greg Sargent writes, as GOP pollster Whit Ayers put it, Trump got elected with minority support from the American electorate. Now he's mainly focused on energizing and solidifying the 40% of Americans who were with him. Trump tweeted today, this was back on October 20th, about little Bob Corker. Another sign he's withdrawing to his campaign safe space, where he belittled Republicans with schoolyard taunts like little Marco to great effect. But the problem isn't just that the minority president is retreating to his minority, it's that this could get worse. Republicans believe Trump's escalating attacks on Corker and the senator's scalding responses threaten to further imperil other Trump goals, such as tax reform. And above all, Trump appears preoccupied with ensuring that his people don't think he's feckless, that is, a big loser.
Yeah, he doesn't know what feckless means.
No, but he knows that there's a difference between winning and losing. So how does he defend himself against this? Today's James Hohmann Daily 202 being the Washington, D.C. Area code. Trump's attacks on Senate Republicans are paying political dividends. What does that mean? It's protecting him from Republican base voters. It's not helping him with the general electorate. Scapegoating the Senate GOP has proven to be an effective political strategy. Activists and donors on the right are primed to blame congressional Republicans, not him, if there's no sweeping rewrite of the nation's tax laws, just as they did after the failure to repeal Obamacare. So Trump doesn't know how to do these negotiations. They'll probably fail for various and sundry reasons, including alienating people like Bob Corker, who, again, you have to go back to in terms of dealing with. And after this, Corker has no incentive to deal with Trump at all.
No, not much.
So if it turns out that tax reform fails, Trump turns around and says, I can't get anything done because of this stupid GOP. You got to replace the GOP with my GOP.
I see. It's plausible. I mean, it is their job to write the legislation.
Right. Several polls have shown that Americans lay more blame on Congress than the president for inaction in Washington.
Sure.
Quinnipiac University asked in an August survey, who was most to blame for the gridlock on health care? 46% said congressional Republicans, 29% said congressional Democrats, 15% said Trump. Among self-identified Republicans, just 4% said Trump deserves blame, and 27% blamed the congressional GOP. Everybody else, said it was the Republicans.
Yeah, Trump's very...
So that's what Trump's counting on, and he's good at deflecting problems onto somebody else and finding scapegoats. So I assume he'll succeed with that. The good news for Democrats is if you're trying to retake Congress, that doesn't help you if you're a Republican.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there's generally speaking two choices are usually offered for Congress, and I guess if Trump spends all of his time running up to the elections saying that the Republicans suck at it, I know he's going to say, of course, replace them and give me the primary opponent, but I don't know if people will necessarily make that translation. I don't know. We'll see how distracted people get if they go into the November election saying, there's two choices here, and the president says the Republicans suck. We'll see.
Well, that just means that the most committed activists stay home, and in an off-year election, that can only help Democrats, who are already at +8, and they need to be in double figures in order to get the double digits in order to get the Congress, at least the House back. But they're not that far, they're within striking distance. Now, here's a piece in the Washington Examiner by Dave Drucker, who's a pretty good conservative watcher, because this has come up. Steve Bannon has publicly come out and said what would normally be stupid things to say in public, except with Republicans, they don't pay any attention to stupid. I think they're inoculated. Two things that he said. One is that he clearly admitted that the only reason that Trump is trying to withhold support payments to insurance companies is to make the Obamacare exchanges fail. That is to say, Bannon admitted that if there's problems with your premiums, it's Trump's doing.
Yes.
Which is not necessarily going to help him this year when your premiums go up. Because Bannon's already said that Trump did that.
Yeah. We'll just see how many people paid attention to it. If they put it on Dancing
They don't
with the
have
Stars.
to. I mean, the polling is already pretty clear. Whoever's in the White House is blamed for whatever happens with insurance.
I hope so.
That's just a straightforward, non-alterable situation, no matter what your politics are.
Well,
so you have
situation.
that. The other side is that Steve Bannon said he's basically at war with congressional Republicans.
That's good.
And one of the things he talked about.
So am I, by the way.
Yeah, but for different reasons. He wants people like Mark Meadows to take over the House. He wants people like Mike Lee. Or maybe Rand Paul
Oh, my.
to be the new Senate majority leader. So he's trying to gin up an insurgency against McConnell.
Sure.
This, of course, is going to fail, but it's like a thing. So that's what Drucker's covering here. Insurgency against Mitch McConnell could falter for lack of alternative. The other, Steve Bannon, President Trump's former chief strategist, he writes, is raising resources and recruiting candidates that challenge incumbent Republicans in 2018 primaries who are loyal to McConnell in a bid to drain the political support for his leadership from the Senate. But his co-conspirators, insurgent conservative figures and grassroots organizations are also pressuring McConnell to step down, haven't identified a senator willing to challenge the Kentucky Republican, never mind beat them.
Right.
This is one of the active conversations taking place right now. Now, you on this show have pointed out so often in the House where it was really much more relevant why Boehner was basically safe. Boehner stepped down, but it's not like people could have beaten him. He stepped down because his life was miserable, which is very different than losing. And nobody's really seriously threatening Paul Ryan, even though Ryan's life is pretty miserable right now, too. That's because you don't have the votes, and somebody else has to step and say, okay, I'm willing to do this. And put, my head in the guillotine here. And nobody wants to.
No. It's a terrible job, for one thing. And second of all, they do not have anyone smart enough to successfully do the job. But in the House, there's no shortage of people stupid enough to think they could do the job. So what tends to happen is, they can't get it, and they don't have enough votes because they splinter the votes among them. They have so many idiots who think they can do the job that each of them gets 20 votes in the initial counts, and then they all drop out, and one guy ends up getting 12 votes for speaker, and everybody says, I'll just take Paul Ryan again.
Yeah, I mean, best of bad alternatives in that regard for us.
Yeah, in the Senate, I think they have fewer dopes who think they can really unseat McConnell and take over the job. Fewer, but not zero.
Well, they've tried recently. It's one thing when nobody's challenged you in a long time. Take the other side of the aisle. Take Nancy Pelosi.
All right.
There are still people that probably think they can unseat her because they really haven't tried seriously in the recent past. But people have tried to unseat the current House Speaker on the Republican side recently enough so that people still remember this and remember how badly it failed.
True. But many of them are very, very dumb.
Well, this is also true. Paul Waldman has a piece in The Week called "The Republican Civil War is Spreading." I mean, you'll see a theme here. Okay. Parties don't descend into vicious civil wars when things are going well for them, he says. So the fact that it's happening now to the GOP tells you a lot about what Republicans are facing, even though they control the White House, Congress, and a majority of state houses and governorships. They're beginning to tear themselves apart over the question of who's to blame for the current difficulties, with one side saying it's the fault of a feckless establishment that is insufficiently loyal to President Trump, and the other side saying, mostly sotto voce, but occasionally out loud, that the responsibility lies with Trump himself.
A lot of feckless people. Where are all the fecks?
I know. I think feckless is a word we should use this week. I saw maniac. That's because it was the anniversary of Teddy Roosevelt getting shot, but still continuing to give his speech. Remember that historical event?
I was there.
And the New York Times headline said, maniac shoots Roosevelt, who goes on to finish the speech.
he fancied himself quite a tough guy. And I guess
they made him tough these days. Not like the snowflakes of today.
Right. Well, they also didn't have armor-piercing bullets.
Yeah. Anyway, if the president was right in his repeated insistence that his administration has been a smashing success, there wouldn't be anything to fight about. But in truth, things could hardly be worse. No major legislation had been passed. The effort to repeal the Affordable Care Act was a spectacular failure. Trump's approval ratings were abysmal, and a majority of Americans say he's not fit to be president. One Republican officeholder after another is choosing not to run for re-election. Polls show Democrats headed for a dramatic win in 2018, and even the one goal Republicans were all supposed to agree on, a big tax cut for the wealthy and corporations, looks like it might be in trouble.
Isn't that great?
Which leads to dissension.
Yeah. Well, it should. However, I remember reading stories that these guys had to show that they could govern, so I'll just wait here patiently.
Yeah, well, we knew that wasn't going to happen. One of the things we were complaining about for the past, 6 years, is that they don't know how to govern, so that was never going to happen. To some on the right, this all smacks of a slow-motion coup by quisling Republicans who lacked the courage to stand behind Trump and testify to his greatness, which is one of the reasons this week the hardline conservative group FreedomWorks wrote a letter to Majority Leader Mitch McConnell demanding he and his leadership team resign for their failure to produce a sufficient quantity of conservative legislation. While the signatories were a little on the has-been side, few were dying to hear what Brent Bozell and Ken Cuccinelli have to say, it was evidence of a disgruntlement in conservative circles.
Those crazy circles.
Yeah, do you really care what Brent Bozell says?
Very little about that. That's true.
So Bannon was talking about that there's a coalition coming together that's going to challenge every Republican Senate incumbent except for Ted Cruz.
Okay, because he's so great.
Parts of that plan raise questions about what kind of crusade this is. First, among the Republicans up for re-election are many who have been completely loyal to Trump. And second, why exempt Ted Cruz? The only logical explanation is that Cruz is a favorite of hedge fund billionaire Robert Mercer and his daughter Rebecca, who were Bannon's prime patrons and the ones likely to fund the effort.
Although they did abandon him pretty quickly, but that was just because they needed a short-term win and he wasn't going to get the nomination. So as a senator, he's fine. Yeah, I expect that's the difference.
Yep. Bannon's obvious goal is to burn the Republican Party to the ground in the hope that something glorious rises from the ashes. It's hard to know how successful it will be, although the candidate he backed in the Alabama special election, religious extremist Roy Moore, beat Luther Strange, the candidate Trump himself endorsed. And lots of other people said that was a major ego blow struck to Trump that he still hasn't recovered from. And that's one of the reasons he's rage tweeting about anything else Obama has done.
Yeah.
One of the things the election showed was that conservative Republican voters won't always take the cues from Trump himself, even if they still support him. And that's what got him so ticked off.
That Missouri race still puzzles me, though. Alabama, rather. I'm sorry.
Alabama, yeah.
And I guess it's just, well, I'm just amazed that he didn't think ahead of time. Like, why did I accept Luther Strange? I know he was the incumbent. I know everybody said I should back him. I think he forgot that Roy Moore existed because he doesn't know anything about Alabama. I don't know a great deal about Alabama, but if you had said to me, Roy Moore's getting in a race, that would ring a bell for me. And if I were Trump, it wouldn't ring a bell because he doesn't know anybody. He doesn't understand what's going on. He doesn't read the news. If the person wasn't on TV, on Dancing with the Stars or Monday Night Football or whatever he watches, he wouldn't know. But, yeah, that's just an unskilled president there.
Well, presumably what happened is that people told him Luther Strange is completely loyal to you. on the one hand.
So what? He doesn't care about
And
that.
on the other hand, if you tell people to do stuff, especially in places like Alabama, which is ruby red, then they'll listen to you. Now, that didn't work out the way he wanted to, and he was embarrassed by it. And by the time he got down there and was ready to do rallies, he obviously made the rally about him. This is going to be important for the next point.
Well, that was always
and
true.
Also, he was already saying, well, if, Roy Moore wins, I can live with that.
Yes, that's true. And I think if he had realized early on, who Roy Moore was, he probably would have picked him. They would have prevailed on him to back the incumbent, and he would have said,
right, but he didn't because he didn't know anything. Okay, so flash forward.
That's all, yeah.
Flash forward to the next governor election in your state.
Mine, yes.
Yes.
November.
You have Ed Gillespie.
We do.
Traditional establishment, generic Republican.
Yeah.
Who likes amnesty and therefore needs to be elected by the same group that voted for Trump, even though he's relatively unpopular in the population centers in the majority of the state. So therefore, Gillespie's going to be spending the rest of the 3 weeks before the election running ads about Confederate statues and sanctuary cities. Even though that's really not where Ed Gillespie's head is, because he feels like he has to.
Yeah, to a certain extent, that's true.
He's trailing in all the polls.
Scumbag.
The polls are anywhere between tie to 13-point lead for Northam. Northam's probably going to win, but it's going to be very close. Everybody agrees. And there's multiple reasons for that, but the main one is who turns out on off-year elections.
That is true.
It's usually older, whiter voters. So, you have this setup here. What does Trump do? Does he endorse Ed Gillespie, who's a traditional establishment Republican of the kind that Steve Bannon is trying to oust? A Luther Strange-style Republican? And risk losing if he does, because if Gillespie loses after Trump's endorsement, there's another ego blow there.
True.
So Trump is doing his best not to get involved with Gillespie, which is fascinating.
Well, okay. I mean, that's sort of a different dynamic now that it's the general election. But it's
the same dynamic as what happened in Alabama.
Well, sort of. They had their primary there. But if he's confused, by all means,
in Alabama, that is the general.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, that's true too. Okay. Well, we'll return to that after this bit of demolition break. See you then. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show on Netroots Radio. We're bringing you back live to the site of the bathroom floor demolition. And Greg Dworkin is with us. So a little bit of hammering, a little bit of vacuuming, a little bit of sawing, just to keep things exciting.
I have a way to fix that.
Oh, yeah? Don't do anything?
So during the break, which you folks generally don't hear on the air, that dramatic break music that you were just hearing is playing in the background while David and I are talking.
Oh.
As I speak with David Waldman Kagro in the morning, I could hear that dramatic music. And of course, when David comes back from the break, you could also hear the dramatic music behind him as he says, okay, we're back from break. Now, what you could do is just play that dramatic music the entire show. Yeah. You wouldn't hear the hammering. You wouldn't hear the vacuum. And it would make the show just way more dramatic.
Well, that's true. I need a longer loop of this. I'll be hitting the button every 2 minutes, but I might as well just start doing it now. We're going to go back on break, everybody, as they're hammering in the background.
Yeah, you just put it on low, but it'll drown out the background, and it'll just make everything that we are saying to each other that much more dramatic.
It's just, exciting.
That's why they add music to movies,
That's true. We need a sound editor for the show. This does sound pretty good, doesn't it? Well, I still hear the hammering, but okay. We're just
you can
faking
hear
it
but the rest of us can't. All we can hear is the dramatic music. Or you can do, squirrel turns head dramatic music. But, just put something
in. Right. I should throw in a couple of things. That makes all the difference.
Because this is like the most dramatic show of all time.
Yes. How about that? Does this help?
Well, yeah. I mean, we're talking about elections. That definitely comes in.
There's so much hammering going on right now. Okay. All right,
but people can't hear it now because of the dramatic music.
Is that so? All right. Well, we'll keep it on. I don't know. I'll try it. I'll experiment. We'll do anything to get away with this. Okay. Man, they're going to tear my house down from underneath me. So what?
Well, I'm telling you, Trump has a ceiling but no floor, and now you're finding out in real life that's exactly how it works.
And no wonder he's so irritated all the time.
Yeah. This article
yes.
by Jonathan Martin in the New York Times is called "Not on the Ballot, but Dominating the Virginia Governor's Race: Trump And it's interesting because there are certain
And
things
exciting.
that Ralph Northam is having difficulty with. Okay. He really has to decide, does he want to go hard against Trump or take the centrist, I'll work with him if he's good and I'll oppose him when he's bad, which is where most of the public in the general world feel. But that's not necessarily the true when it comes to, off-year elections where you have to gin up your base. So Northam is having problems balancing that, as are all Democrats, because by almost definition in DNA, Democrats are willing to make compromises if, in fact, they think it helps the constituents. And that is not what Trump-hating Democrats want right now. The other side of the coin is Ed Gillespie has an even bigger problem because he doesn't know how to straddle the Corey Stewart world, the guy who ran against him, who was the carpetbagging Confederate who was born up north but moved to Virginia as the last defense against Confederate statues. And he doesn't know how to balance that part of the Republican Party and the Trumpists with his own centrist instincts, which is to make compromises. And the last thing in the world Republicans want to do is make compromises. It's the Democrats who are much more comfortable with that than the independents. So Gillespie doesn't know how to balance that. And so he figures the best thing to do, he's trailing in the polls anyway, is to go all out Trumpian and go after sanctuary cities. And if he could, I think he would run ads against Max Baucus and morph him into Osama bin Laden. I mean, that's the kind of thing that he's left with, and he'd like to do that. And he'll get his votes, and he'll get his base out to vote for that sort of thing. And it'll be a relatively close election. And he could win, because Northam isn't just dominating everything. And there's no way Northam's going to run away with this, because again, he's got that split between I have to govern, so I have to be reasonable. But at the same time, it's Trump and nobody wants me to be reasonable. And Gillespie isn't the easiest figure to demonize, because he's just so bland.
I try, but yeah, he is. He's pretty milquetoast.
Yeah. So that's what's going on in Virginia politics. You're closer to it than I am. I see like a 1 or 2 point lead for Northam, but I don't really see it getting any bigger than that. I think he's probably going to win, and I think people will be disappointed when he does because he didn't win bigger. And I think a lot will be made out of this off-year election, which really has a lot more to do with the dynamics of all politics is local than it does about whether or not Trump can get people to the polls.
Yeah, well, they're trying their best, certainly. We did get I can report at least from the on-the-ground perspective, we had a lot of canvassing going on in our neighborhood. I had 2 door knockers over the weekend. One for the unions, the IBEW, was out knocking on doors and working hard. And then, of course, the local civilian Democrats also knocked on the door, handing out literature, making sure we had the full slate and all that. So it's nice to see. And you can hear they're knocking on the door right now,
right.
Trying to get in.
But here's where it comes down to a decision for Trump. And going back to Luther Strange and to the Roy Moore situation. Does Gillespie ask Trump to come down and campaign for him, given that he's trailing?
Yeah, maybe. I mean,
but if
he's
he does,
really looking at losing.
If he does, then Trump comes to Virginia, and it's a Trump rally, and it's not about Gillespie.
Well, that's
and
true.
Goodness knows what he might say. It was at the Roy Moore rally that Trump started all this NFL nonsense. I mean, you never know what's going to come out of Trump's mouth, and if you're Ed Gillespie, you'd like to know what comes out of his mouth before you invite him. At the same time, if you do invite Trump down, you might gin up your base a little bit, but Trump isn't all that popular in Virginia, and you're certainly going to gin up the anti-Trump vote. So on balance, it's not so clear that Trump coming down and campaigning for Gillespie is going to help the way Obama, who is coming, going to be rallying for Northam.
It's definitely much more of a crapshoot. But I guess if you're just looking at losing, otherwise, he still wants to come in. Maybe it's Ed Gillespie.
Right.
Or Trump.
But, okay, so Gillespie may say on balance, all right, maybe I do want him. Maybe. It's a risk, but I'm already trailing, so what the heck. But does Trump want to go? Because if Trump goes down there and Gillespie loses, then it's going to be seen as Trump losing. And that's, in fact, what he has told people. He said, I don't want to go down and support another loser. I already did that in Alabama. I hated it.
Yeah, I don't know. I do think the dynamic is a little bit different. It was dumb of him to get involved, perhaps, in the primary in Alabama. It really was. Here, he's got no choice, and he can certainly brush it off by saying, that's the Republican I got handed. I campaigned for Republicans. It'll be interesting to see whether they can keep him out, too. What if Trump decides he wants to be in, like he's knocking on my door now, and Gillespie wants him out? The guy spends every weekend in Virginia. So I don't know what you do. This is really getting crazy.
I'm telling you, you need that music.
I may be, try it out. He appears in Virginia twice every weekend. He takes his ride out my way, and I think I am going to try the music. We're not going on break, but I may just try it. But he's here all the time. He's practically, at this point, a resident of Virginia. He spends as many days in Virginia as in the White House. I think the latest figure, by the way, 5 out of the last 9 days he's been golfing, and he's done it all in Virginia. He's practically a resident here. And what if he goes golfing and he decides to... Yes, true. At more than just taxpayer expense, of course, as he charges the Secret Service for the carts. But what if he decides to go golfing and he just says, cameras and microphones allowed to Trump National today. I'm basically having a rally, or I'm giving a speech about this election, whether Gillespie wants it or not. I mean, what the hell? That would really be interesting. That would be very disruptive, and everyone loves to disrupt.
Right. Well, I think the graphic.
Yeah.
Couple of things to add in terms of what else is Trump doing. I mean, he's got some other things on his plate right at the moment. I sent you a graphic from a NBC First Read piece here, just to give you an idea of what Congress is up to. Right? Just a couple of 5 or 6 bullet points. Due to Trump's decertification of the Iran deal, Congress now has 60 days to reinstate sanctions against Iran or to modify the law that governs congressional oversight. Lawmakers will see if they can try to shore up the Obamacare markets, though Democrats doubt Trump would ever sign legislation. The Senate considers its 2018 budget resolution. In 2 months, Congress will have to pass legislation to keep the government open. Congress is considering what to do with the DACA program, and the GOP is still eyeing tax reform. So all of this stuff is going on while Trump, at the same time, has one other thing that really worries him and worries the donors, and that is this piece in The Hill that just came out a minute ago.
All right.
That the GOP donors attending a retreat for Speaker Paul Ryan in Jackson Hole, Wyoming in August were given a slideshow highlighting the Democrats who would take over committees if Republicans lose the House. One slide features Elijah Cummings, who would take over the oversight panel, and that would give Cummings and Democrats subpoena power, which more and more Republicans, according to CNN, believe would lead to an impeachment of Trump.
Yes. Now, that's supposed to be a reason not to abandon Republicans, as opposed to you'll rid us of our problems.
So Trump has Congress to worry about.
Okay.
Whatever happens with Gillespie, he doesn't have subpoena power, so what does he care?
Yeah.
This is all about Trump. So the usual political calculations that say, well, of course, the sitting president of the same party is going to come down and campaign for the governor in his own party. Of course he will. Well, all these other dynamics are saying, well, maybe not. What does Trump care about Gillespie? Gillespie's not going to subpoena him. It's got nothing to do with Trump.
This is
all
not
about
normal.
Trump. Everything is about Trump to Trump.
Yeah. I guess so, and I suppose now that he's doing his own Obamacare sabotage, he doesn't need the governors as much. So, there's nothing really. I guess there's really nothing in it for him. And as long as,
but he could lose. I mean, the downside is he could lose, and he hates that.
That is amazing. That I guess that's the one fun thing I think about his ego for us is that he thinks of other people's losses as his losses if he's at all involved in it. That's
exactly.
Really surprising.
That's the reason why he wouldn't go down
Yeah.
and campaign for Gillespie. So if he doesn't show, we know why. If he does, it's the usual dynamics. But if he doesn't, I think we pretty much spec out why he might not.
Okay. He's a very childish guy.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. I'm going to leave you with a couple of fun pieces here. Not fun in the classic sense. Jonathan Bynes, who's a staff writer for Jimmy Kimmel,
Okay.
has this piece in the Huffington Post called Trump or Weinstein? Take the quiz.
Right.
Test your wits against these 20 allegations, each from a different woman, and see how you stack up. He's not doing it for fun. He's not making light of it. But he's trying to illustrate the whole idea that, oh, Weinstein, all the Democrats have to give the money back from 35 years ago.
Yeah.
Our parallel, who happens to be in our party, don't talk about that.
Right. Okay. Yeah, they're in denial now. There's actually a Trump sexual assault denialism
There is.
movement.
And interestingly, there's this piece from October 15th, 2017, so relatively new. Trump given a subpoena for all documents relating to assault allegations. A woman who said Donald Trump groped her has subpoenaed his campaign for documents about any woman alleging that Donald J. Trump touched her inappropriately. Trump has denied her accusations and is fighting the subpoena. So this is going on in the background here, which makes the denial really kind of awkward. But let me give you, I mean, there's like 20 of these, but let me give you 5.
Okay.
All right? I'll give you the statement. This is made by individual women, each one different. And you tell me whether it's Trump or Weinstein.
I'll do my best.
Okay? 1, he was like an octopus. His hands were everywhere.
That sounds Trumpy.
Yeah, that was Trump.
Okay.
I'd say, I don't want to lie down, and it would turn into a wrestling match. I remember yelling, I didn't come here for this. And he'd say, just calm down.
That sounds Weinsteinish.
It does, but it was Trump.
Dang. See? That's
the point, really.
Yeah.
Okay, this one's an easy one because it's been in the news. Grabbed her breasts after asking if they were real and put his hands up her skirt.
Okay, that sounds Trumpy, too.
That was Weinstein.
Dang, I can't get it. You said it was easy.
Well, because that woman who just said, why did you touch my breast? And that was part of the sting operation that Ronan Farrow wrote about.
Oh, yes, okay. All right. Well,
now that I remind you, remember that one?
You know what? It's also confusing.
I know. I pushed his chest, put space between us, and said, come on, man, get real. He repeated my words back to me, get real, as he began thrusting his genitals. I'm doing the radio-friendly ones.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's probably Weinstein, although I did see Trump do that in the debate.
That was Trump.
Dang. I can't get these guys straight.
Well, that's the point, really.
Oh.
And
Yes,
that's the point that Jonathan Bynes is making. And so the idea that Donald Jr. is going to say, oh, well, Weinstein, you have to give all the money back and disassociate the party from this guy.
Yeah.
It works both ways. And number 5, the last one I'll give you. As a woman, I felt violated. I referred to this as a rape.
Wasn't that Ivana?
It was Trump, yeah.
Okay, I think that was Ivana's words.
Right.
Yeah, okay, good book. Yeah, that was the one where Michael Cohen said that's not possible because there's no such thing as spousal rape because I live in the medieval era, apparently. Not
Michael Cohen, the writer for the Boston Globe, but Michael Cohen, the attorney.
Yes, although there are probably a lot of those too, but we know which one we're talking about.
Right, pretty fascinating stuff. So again, not meant to be, isn't this ridiculous, funny. It's, let's just use satire here to make a valid point, which satire is often so good at doing. So that's why I included that piece. And then lastly, and this is kind of fascinating,
yes.
the Health 202. Trump has badly undercut his own administration in Puerto Rico. We know that because of all the tweets.
Yes.
Okay. But the U.S., this piece writes, has dispatched to Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands more than 19,000 military and civilian personnel who are working around the clock to restore electricity, distribute supplies, and care for the injured, according to FEMA. That adds up to a pretty strong response to an extremely challenging situation, relief experts say. But you wouldn't know that if you just listened to Trump talk about the island and its inhabitants, millions of whom remain without electricity and telephone communications in the wake of Hurricane Maria. The president has blundered his way through the response and then talks about some of the ridiculous tweets that we all know about. But they interview James Lee Witt, who says that he basically gives the government an A+ for the effort, given the stretched resources and how much they have to devote to Irma and Harvey and so on and so forth. And I looked at that, scratched my head and said, I don't really think that that's right.
Yeah, A+ is not right.
A+ is not right. And, part of the reason I think that's so, Aaron Blake had tweeted this because it was from the Washington Post. And I said, the problem with this is rural areas and the inability to get things to non-city citizens. I think Witt has a point. That is to say, it's not like the government isn't doing anything. They're doing a tremendous amount. but it's not enough. And I said, I think that WIT gave a government response. That is to say, we're doing everything we're supposed to. And that's not always the right answer. For example, the FEMA distribution centers aren't working right, say the islanders who aren't getting water. So giving everybody an A+ is congratulating government for being government, not for meeting needs. And I think it's kind of tone deaf. I think it's tone deaf when WIT does it, and I think it's tone deaf when Trump does it. Interestingly, one of the people who picked up on that tweet and sent along is Reed Galen, who's a longtime strategist for the Republican Party, and agreed with me and said, this is not a box checking exercise.
Yeah.
I did this, so it's an A+. Yeah, but people aren't getting the water. That's one of those, the operation was a success, but the patient died kind of responses.
Yeah.
And no, it's not adequate.
We are not getting hot bottled water to dehydrated babies.
Yeah, that sort of thing. Anyway, so I thought I would bring that to people's attention. It is unfair to say nothing is being done. That's not the complaint and concern. The concern is there are inefficiencies and responses that have been not well orchestrated and not well instituted, and people aren't getting what they need. And as long as people aren't getting what they need, there is no way you could look at this and say, well, this is a wonderful response.
Mm-hmm.
That's something you do when you're trying to protect your agency or your butt,
Right.
That's not the proper response at all.
On the one hand, your agency. On the other hand, your butt.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a hell of a comparison.
Anyway, I thought I'd throw that out there because it is out there.
Right. And so we're just tossing it around. It was already here when we got here. It's not our fault. But yeah, you can't give yourself an A+ for effort. That's a participation trophy, and everybody hates those. And you can't be doing that. You can't. They're still burying the numbers in terms of casualties in Puerto Rico. I mean, I think the president's going to stick to the 15 figure that somebody handed him while he was there. Meanwhile, I did see over the weekend that some intrepid reporters had gone so far as to try to call every single hospital in Puerto Rico and ask them, what are you seeing in terms of fatalities? And those that are actually open and able to answer their phones apparently are telling people, our morgues were overwhelmed weeks ago. We've been keeping people in refrigerated shipping containers. We have no way of counting them at this point. And, here Trump is sticking to it's the best hurricane ever because 15. Not like millions like Obama and Katrina, which wasn't Obama, of course, and wasn't millions either, but okay. This is where he's sticking to. But yeah, he could certainly be doing a lot more. He could certainly be doing like less golfing or photograph himself in meetings looking concerned, but you can't tell between concerned and constipated with him anyway. He doesn't photograph well. Still, right. The effort. If he could get an A for effort, but right now he's working on his way up to F+ at this point.
Right. Anyway, that's my summary for today. I thought I'd do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, just like the Pundit Roundup has, which you can read this morning on the Daily Coast if you are so inclined. If not, you can always read the summary that Scott Anderson does for the show later on in the day. And in the meantime, this is Greg Dworkin speaking with my good friend David Waldman and thousands of others, apparently, according to the background, over at the Kagro World Headquarters. Thanks so much for having us on. And I'll be back on Wednesday. David will be back tomorrow. And we'll go from there.
Yes. Okay. Thanks very much, Greg. Give us the opportunity to put the microphone on mute from time to time and play with the sound effects.
Mm-hmm. Take care.
Appreciate it. Thank you. You do the same.
A very dramatic show.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll play some dramatic effects on the way out. Maybe the horror dramatic on the way out. We may as well have a tropical storm in the background as well.
I think they just discovered buried treasure in your floor there. So
that may be. I believe it belongs to me. That's the good
news.
Or
maybe they just found out where the bodies are buried.
I have not figured that out myself, but it does sound like it's calmed down a bit.
Yeah. Anyway, take care. Talk to you tomorrow.
Thank you. Okay. We'll move on from there then. Speaking of tropical storms, I did see also over the weekend, nothing wrong with the planet. Just wanted to let you know that was the case. Apparently, the latest of the tropical storms to develop into a major hurricane is Ophelia, and apparently has done so further east and, for the most part, further north as well than any other major hurricane. Apparently, someone's been tweeting around the chart of these things. There's been hurricane activity further north, but it's all occurred further to the west. And I guess this means storms that remained major hurricanes as they swept back out to sea if they skirted the northeast coast of the United States. But this Ophelia storm, I think sitting at Category 2, Category 3, and like hovering out in the North Atlantic and on its way up. And I guess last I saw, anyway, it looked like the cone, the prediction cone there, brought it ashore in Ireland, which I don't think they get a lot of hurricanes there. I mean, I'm certain they get storms, and I know a lot of these tropical storms come up the East Coast and then they go out off, Newfoundland and, even out towards Greenland, I guess. But I think they dissipate because there's a lack of the warm water that feeds these storms. And I guess, I don't know, has Ireland been hit by hurricanes? I imagine it has to have happened at some point. But this thing, I mean, really seriously going to sweep over the entire length of Ireland and then into northern Scotland. I mean, we're talking about it maybe up I guess if it turned a little bit, it would go to Iceland, which I don't think usually gets hurricanes, but pretty surprising. And also, I thought real interesting was one of the interesting things about the charts being sent around, not just the position of this storm, but that the radar, I guess, that they used and to make the predictions, the modeling that they had showing where this thing was going to go, kind of abruptly cut off along a straight line to the north and to the east because the software that generates these models is just not programmed to take tropical activity that far north and that far east. I thought that was kind of weird. So I guess, I don't know what they call it. Is it still a hurricane if it goes there? Is it just not tropical? They call it extratropical or something like that. I'm not sure. It's a kind of weird situation. Just wanted to report to you that nothing was wrong with the planet. Our computers don't understand what's going on. And I guess that's that. Anyway, I don't understand it any better than anybody else does. I just thought it was interesting and worth noting. Let's see. It's almost time for our second break here. We had a comment, though, that came in during the last couple minutes of the show. Oops, I think I've lost it here. Boswood, who tweets as Bosengood, BOSENGOOD. Breaking. Donald Trump, just a good comment along the lines of what Greg had brought us. Breaking, Donald Trump knew all about Donald Trump and said nothing. That's actually the title of a recent diary from, I guess, last evening from Bethesda 1971. Those of you who follow all of our wacky names over at Daily Kos. And making a good point. Just the headline alone really makes the point. And, well, let's see what the diary says. Doesn't look like it was highly trafficked, so let's see if we can change that. This is big, folks. Major media, including CNN, The Daily Beast, Deadline, Hollywood, and The Washington Examiner, are now reporting President Donald Trump was long aware of Donald Trump's history of sexual assault. Note the quotes below are actual quotes from actual journalists, quote unquote. That says, with minimal editing, the names have been changed to protect the perversely accused and implicate the obviously guilty. Let's see here. What do we got from the Daily Beast? Chris Cuomo suggested that the reason for the silence has everything to do with Donald Trump's cozy relationship to Donald Trump. I guess what's happening here is basically after all the accusations about Harvey Weinstein and how Democrats had to face up and own up to the situation, et cetera, nobody's busy owning up to Donald Trump, least of all Donald Trump. I think basically the headline makes all the point that's necessary here. Donald Trump knew exactly what he was up to. Of course, so did all his supporters. But like we said, growing denialist movement up to and including having Republican surrogates on TV insist that they've never heard of any allegations of misconduct in that sense against Donald Trump. I have no recollection of that. And I guess television talk show hosts are left with just the option of sputtering and insisting, how could you possibly have missed it? And come on. And then basically we'll have to leave it there and it's time for a break. Let's see. our Canadian pundit friend, Brian Monroe, Canuck Pundit on Twitter, says, at least to Fox News folks, said Weinstein Company, at least the Fox News, I guess, folks said Weinstein Company should be shut down because of rape allegations. But what about Roger Ailes? That's a good question. Gives us a good opportunity to remind everybody that, of course, Fox News operated on very, very much the same principle as Weinstein's production company. I would say very similar operations obtain in both places. Both places, I think, honestly, were thinly disguised as businesses. They were essentially sex trafficking operations for the boss, and the outward appearance of being either a film production company or a television news production company was for the purpose of raising the money that it takes to finance an operation whereby the boss can live the lifestyle he wants and employ enough assistants so that they can run interference and even help entrap the next victims of the sexual assaults. Roger Ailes, TV news was a convenient excuse for him to keep enough blonde women moving in and out of his office to keep him happy. And film production, again, likewise, because they're both visual arts, essentially, the excuse was, well, you got to have an attractive product. You just need that. And it just so happens that somebody has to make the decisions about which people are going to be used on camera and where and when. And I might as well be the judge of that. And that's supposed to be a good excuse for a constant parade of women. Apparently it was. And the product wasn't always that good either. We'll be back after this. Welcome back once again to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. The exciting music drowning out all the activity in the background. Actually, I think we may be, I don't know, we'll see whether things stay quieted down or not. I don't know whether the rest of the work can continue, but apparently in a bid to, I don't know what, dramatize the deprivation of Puerto Rico, we have shut off our own water here at Kagro in the Morning World Headquarters. Apparently a problem with the valves in the bathrooms that they're working on, and so apparently all the water had to be shut off so that we could get a plumber in now on top of it all. And who knows whether, I wonder whether the work has to wait for the plumber to show up. I don't know. Exciting new developments, always the case here in the Kagro in the Morning Show. Live radio, it's so exciting. Seriously, though, when we last left off, I was making this comparison. I did spend some time on it over the weekend on Twitter, and I absolutely stand by it. You've heard me, of course, accuse everybody on basically the entirety of the right, and I mean it. I am not kidding. The alt-right being a sex cult, Fox News, sex cult, Breitbart, sex cult, Trump world, sex cult. It's all driven. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, we've all spent the weekend listening to the widespread prevalence, really taking time to take stock of the widespread prevalence of sexual harassment across hundreds of industries, maybe just all industries, because, as it happens, many industries are populated by men, and apparently they seem very much driven by their sexual desires, whether they're appropriate or otherwise. And they don't seem to be able to leave them at home and not bring them with them to work. So one of the things we're discovering is just how many industries this is a part of. But I think that visual arts like television and film production are particularly susceptible to this for a number of reasons. One, lots of money floating around, and that tends to be a major indicator of all sorts of corruption of all kinds, including the corruption of the workplace and the leveraging of the power that comes with amassing lots of money into the sexual gratification of the bosses. You'd think you could find plenty of time to gratify those desires elsewhere and off the clock, but I guess these things are so tied together, especially where, you have a single rainmaker boss that sits at the top of this food chain and is a famous person and leverages his personal fame and money into yet more money. But add the visual arts as an excuse for demanding a constant parade of attractive women. I mean, generally speaking, it's the women who are speaking out here. But we're also learning, of course, over the weekend and even in the middle of last week that, of course, yes, it happens to men too. It's anybody that can be objectified, and I suppose that's anybody, or I guess if you explore far enough, anything. But it's the attractiveness factor. I mean, there's a built-in excuse for this. Why are you insisting on a parade of attractive women or men, for that matter, be brought through your office? And the answer, it's not me. It's the nature of the business. It's visual arts, film, television. That's what people want. You know, I mean, you give the people what they want, which is the sinking feeling that I'm raping everybody they're watching every day. I don't think that was really the intention there of the way we express what we want. But yeah, we want the people on camera, whether it's television or movies, to be attractive people, I guess, or at least we've been told that's what we want, and we don't seem to object at this point. But anyway, that's the perfect built-in excuse for demanding that your type be brought through your office in a constant stream. And then, of course, you layer on top of that the enormous power you have as the decision maker behind the scenes about who gets those breaks and who doesn't, and we all know the story from there. But I also read some very interesting writing over the weekend. And we might as well stay on the subject, even though there's plenty to talk about elsewhere. But I'll mention to you, did I put this in? I don't know. There's so much that I ended up putting in Pocket that I don't even know how to sort it out. But I might not have put this one aside. I think I may have tweeted about it, though. So if I scroll down a little bit, I'll find it. But there was a very interesting piece. It was a tweet storm, essentially. And this is where all the best thinking is being done these days, at least in real time. But a woman who had taken it upon herself to explain, for instance, you might have heard the backlash last week and over the weekend of, well, yeah, sure, Hollywood is what it is. But on the other hand, why are these women putting themselves in these positions? Why aren't they seeing the vulnerability that comes with being invited to for instance, to a hotel room by Harvey Weinstein or any other? I mean, any producer basically invites you to their hotel room. That should be a red flag. And for you and for me and for normal people, getting invited to some random dude's hotel room obviously is it would raise a red flag. But there's a number of reasons why. Well, one, Harvey Weinstein wasn't a random dude in this setting, but also why the hotel room doesn't raise the same sort of red flag as it does for the rest of us. And part of the answer lies in, this isn't the rest of us that we're talking about. When you and I, normal people, think of being invited to a hotel room, and we think about what the hotel room would look like, it would look like, you open the door and there's maybe a bed or two beds and a television and not much else in there. And essentially then you're saying you're being invited to a bedroom and not much more. But that's not the same thing as being invited to a hotel room or a famous movie producer's hotel room in the Hollywood world. And I'm not seeing it immediately. I'm going to have to keep scrolling here. But the basic idea here was the hotel room meeting in entertainment circles. Sure. I mean, we also think of the casting couch and other stupid things like that. But it's actually like a real thing. Remember that a lot of these people are, well, for one thing, bi-coastal, as they like to say, or they're traveling around. And to travel to LA or to New York when you are not native to it and don't maintain a residence there or an office space there is not out of the ordinary in television and film production. And also the hotel rooms that your basic Hollywood producers, and I mean basic Hollywood producers, you don't even have to be a superstar like Weinstein, the hotel rooms that they take are the ones that you and I, generally speaking, never get to see unless we're there on business or the company has taken one of these suites. But that's a very different situation. Very often up at the, sometimes up in the upper floors, not always, of the kinds of hotels, really any hotel, but the kinds of hotels that these guys tend to frequent. Those hotel rooms are really suites that are specifically designed to have a workspace. And very often, when they hire them out for this purpose, the beds aren't even there. They move those things out of there and they just use the meeting rooms. But even, you don't have to be at the Four Seasons to have seen these things. You'll run into them at, the Comfort Inn and Suites will have one too for like regular business people who are actually, traveling with the people from the company, and you'll see it fairly frequently. So yeah, I'm not finding this tweet storm, which is too bad because it was a really pretty good one explaining, they take one of these places out and, here we go. I think I know. I think I have figured out where to find this thing. Okay. And this will bring me back to the tweet storm. Help me organize the thoughts. It's Jennifer Morrow whose tweets I was reading, and I am not even really 100% sure who Jennifer Morrow is, but you can follow along if you want. Jennifer E. Morrow on Twitter, and it was a really interesting and informative series of tweets. I'll just read it and comment along the way. That'll probably be more organized. Seen a lot of why would you meet a Hollywood producer in his hotel room on Twitter this week, but not a good explanation of why perhaps you might. So here it is. When most people picture meet in a hotel room, they picture a guy standing at the door, maybe a bathrobe, 2 beds and a TV behind him, typical hotel room. But this is not what most Hollywood people think of. When they hear hotel room meeting, someone at Weinstein's level would have a suite, as we were mentioned. And those suites are, as we said, specifically designed for conferences, usually with a living and meeting room area, sometimes even water coolers and AV equipment standard in the room, or at least brought in for the purposes of these meetings. Why? Because there are actual professional meetings going on there. They're using the hotel room as temporary office space. And yeah, I guess you could rent temporary office space, but temporary office space that's available in New York, LA, etc. You might use that, but you might use that if you're a lawyer. You're going to do a deposition. If you are a Hollywood mogul, you want more comfort. You want to be able to have room service, bring food in, have catering, etc. A cushy atmosphere. And of course, if you can do it at the Four Seasons, so much the better. Everybody thinks, terrific, what a nice location to go to, rather than some random office building downtown. Anyway, so when you walk into one of those places, you're seated at a table across from the guy that you're meeting with, and his usually female assistant is handing you a water bottle. Why usually female? Well, there's a lot going on here. One layer, of course. Subordinates, usually female. That happens because male dominance of these industries and the power aspect. And of course, he wants to have a little bit of eye candy around as well. And so that's who the job goes to. But there's more to it than that. The female assistant is there to keep you comfortable. Like as if you're a woman, an actress, being invited to this meeting, and okay, yeah, you're used to the hotel room meeting, you're used to the idea of the hotel room not being a hotel room per se, but a temporary office space, but still, maybe, you've been around, right? You know the stories about certain producers, and even if you've never run into one of them, you're aware that they're out there. Maybe you're a little bit nervous about meeting alone, or maybe you haven't brought your agent with you, I don't know. And it makes you a little bit nervous, but what's supposed to put you at ease is, one, there are other people around, and two, it's a woman, and a woman wouldn't put me in danger, wouldn't stand by silently while I was in danger from a sexual predator. That's the problem, because of course you are in danger. And the serious issue here is that woman knows you're in danger, and she's doing it anyway for money. Which brings me back to my original point, which was that these things are sex trafficking operations, and I'm not kidding. I'm not just trying to twist the knife on Roger Ailes, who's dead, or Harvey Weinstein, who's alive and never hears a word I say, and it doesn't matter anyway, and nobody's going to think any better or worse of Harvey Weinstein based on what I say about him if I'm just kidding. But I'm not. It really is a sex trafficking operation, and you're beginning to see why I think that's the case. And it's almost as if Harvey Weinstein himself were banging on the door, trying to get in here to stop me. You can imagine that to be the case if you need this reading to be more dramatic. So, where Jennifer left off, you walk into one of those suites. You're seated at a table, which looks like a meeting table. Across from the guy is usually female assistant handing you a water bottle, because that's what gets done at meetings where you're not going to be assaulted, you see. How do you know you're not going to be assaulted? This is a business meeting. How do you know it's a business meeting? Look at this table. Look at the assistant who's here. Look at the water bottle you're being given. So it's all about creating a scene. Many of the women attacked by Weinstein, she continues, report that's exactly how it started. The assistant showed them in. They were greeted politely. Then, unexpectedly, Weinstein would break apart the environment. The assistant would disappear magically. The interviewee asked to come to another room. And if it all starts so innocently, look, here's the table. It's for meetings. It's a meeting table. It looks like a meeting table. The chairs look like meeting chairs. The water bottle looks like a meeting water bottle. The assistant looks like an assistant who would be at a meeting. Then, sure, fine, okay, I can see that this supposed hotel room really looks like an office. Well, we have some AV equipment here, a water cooler, all of that stuff. You know what? Come in here. The other piece of equipment that I need to use to show you scenes from the movie that I need you to do, or something, whatever it is in here. And it's not in there. It's a bed. Holy mackerel. Where'd that assistant go? How could I have been let in here? This is really disturbing, but surely this other woman who was here for my comfort where did she go? Gone. Unexpectedly, Weinstein would break apart the environment. The assistant would disappear. The interviewee asked to come to another room. What was happening in those cases, she continues, was not women who ignored the loaded implications of a hotel room and proceeded anyway, but a producer who knew that they expected him to have professional safeguards, who gave the impression of safeguards and then betrayed them. If you read the stories, Weinstein couldn't have hurt as many people as he did if not for his team convincing the women it was safe. In other words, it wasn't a rogue actor who, hey, I just can't control that Harvey, his libido, I mean, we make movies here, but boy, that Harvey, he's just, he's uncontrollable. He's a beast. He's an animal, but what can you do? I mean, that's just the way the guy is. That's not a valid excuse. The whole rest of the team, and this is why the Weinstein Company really needs to be liquidated and rubbed out. Yes, it might have been the case that his partners didn't assault anybody, but they knew that he did, and the company was built to allow it to continue. It was built to facilitate it starting and built to allow it to continue. These assistants don't disappear. People aren't like, oh, my phone went off, my beeper went off back in the old days, right? It wasn't like they did that. And gosh, every time Harvey has one of these meetings, as soon as I give the water bottle, I get a mysterious call from a number I don't understand, and I go outside, and every time I come back in, somebody's leaving in a huff saying they've been sexually assaulted. I don't know how this is happening to me. They know what the game is. It's a plan. And those people were hired for the express purpose of facilitating his rapes. Maybe some other people's as well. But and I guess it's possible, you'd have a hard time convincing me, but I guess it's possible that there might have been some higher-ups who were legitimately involved solely in the production of films and who genuinely had no idea that their partner was doing all of this stuff, but I really, really doubt it because people talk. So if they live in an isolation booth other than when they're at work, I guess it's possible. But really, the whole point is that he had assembled a team and he was able to pay for this because he had limitless resources, because movie production is an incredibly lucrative business if you can do it right, if you can do it well. And apparently, aside from the fact that he was an abominable human being, he was producing successful films. The money was rolling in, and you had to keep it rolling in, and that meant keeping people quiet and keeping people from kicking him out of the movie industry. But all of that money would go into, how much does it cost to buy young female assistants who will hang around, make actresses feel like they're not going to be attacked, and then disappear at the appropriate moment so that I can perpetrate this attack in relative quietude. And we'll come back tomorrow and do it again if I ask them. How much does that cost? Probably a lot. Luckily, I have a lot because I'm in the perfect industry. 1, tons of money rolling around. 2, tons of perverts rolling around as well. And 3, lots of excuses for collecting the kind of people I'm attracted to and shipping them to my office. It's like Uber, but for rape. It's sexual assault, Amazon Prime. I like this actress. A man, too many men, apparently, and who knows who else. I guess women, too. I mean, the whole idea is, of course, to market an attractive product here. And let's face it, people are watching movies saying, that person on the screen right now is sexually attractive to me. I like this. I like the feeling it gives me. Thankfully, I think most people then say, well, that's the end of that. Enjoyed it. Good movie, liked the story, etc. But apparently there's a great many number of people out there who also say, no, I have to make this real life. I actually have to have sexual contact with that person. Now, I guess luckily for the people involved in the industry, most people don't have that kind of access. I can't get on the phone and say, actor or actress whom I admire so much and found so sexually attractive, come to my house or my office tomorrow. I insist upon it. But Harvey Weinstein can. I could, of course, say, I've got a perfect project for you. I've got a movie that I think you'd be perfect in. But for the most part, without any credentials, they just laugh at you and say, I'm not taking this call, or who cares? I'm not going. Harvey Weinstein and others can do that. They have the perfect excuse for calling up some person they find attractive out of the blue and saying, come to my office. And then they have a team available to them that they've paid enough money to that they can rent a rape room for the day, decorate it up to look like an office, and everybody runs the play. Everybody knows the plan, right? Give her the bottle of water, and then you leave, and I sexually abuse her. Okay? Got it? Good. They probably don't necessarily lay it all out there, but they do. And nobody, I don't think, is lost in all of this. I don't understand why Harvey keeps asking me to leave. And I guess the minute you find out and object, you could be fired, of course, but then you lose your place on the gravy train. Roger Ailes was doing exactly the same thing. I imagine somewhat less money involved in that than in the biggest of big budget successful Hollywood movie production, but still plenty of dollars, no doubt about it. And I guess there was, of course, also the ideological bent, which helped with things, but that was just to find a niche in a more competitive industry, daily television production, than film production. There aren't quite as many alternatives, and people can't just, I don't know. But it's a little bit different. But essentially, it offered him the same cover. Bring me a constant parade of women. It wouldn't be exactly the same. Roger Ailes couldn't say, I just saw Angelina Jolie in a movie, and God, she looked gorgeous. Make sure she comes in to interview for a job at Fox News, because that's not going to work. She's not going to go. Harvey Weinstein had a better scam going in that respect. But I think Ailes thought he was going to, and he did get away with it for an awful long time, right? I mean, maybe at scale he gets to get away with it for a longer period of time and to an older age because it's less on the radar. You are bringing in relative unknowns and offering them a job that, it makes them famous, but only famous to a limited extent, not like movie star fame being on Fox News. But essentially, they both strangely gravitated to visual arts entertainment, and I think it was largely for the same reason. They may have also had other ulterior motives, but I think it was largely driven by the fact that they thought, this is great. I can basically shop for people I want to rape from among essentially, well, here's your... going to cast aspersions on Facebook again, right? The original Facebook, there goes the tile saw, everybody. The original Facebook concept being just browsing for co-eds, essentially. They just browse for people they find sexually attractive and say, bring them in. It's just that Harvey Weinstein had like the ultimate fantasy version of the one that Roger Ailes, I guess, aged out of. and eventually. But didn't he get his start? He got his start in talk show production, where there would be more opportunity to bring in your Hollywood starlet types and say, you know, we can make you famous by putting you on the Mike Douglas show. That worked in the day. And maybe you'd like to sit down with me and talk about your future. And I guess as he aged out of that, he moved into Fox News, and maybe he even was politically interested in doing what he was doing at Fox, and just had the access to the sexual abuse along the way as an added bonus. I don't know. They're pretty disgusting guys, but I will say this: there's a sort of evil genius to it, and in particular for Weinstein, because right up until this moment, and maybe even still at this moment, people are still willing to say, well, the old, ye old Hollywood casting couch. It's a tried and true tradition. Of course, it has been tried. It's not true to any of our values, obviously, and it was disgusting even in the olden days when we supposedly winked at it. Everybody knew that it was still pretty craven, but I guess, I don't know. Somehow we haven't quite moved out of that entirely. But this may be the death knell of it, I don't know. But we may have to uncover more and more of these producers in order to really be done with it. And we may, who knows, done with may be a relative term as well. Anyway, I don't think I have anything else to add to that except by way of justifying my insistence that, one, they're all essentially sex cults at bottom. That is to say, they were set up for Harvey Weinstein to get his jollies, or Roger Ailes to get his. But it was also clear, especially in Roger Ailes' case, that this was available to others too. Play ball as a male power figure in all of this. Don't take me down, and I'll make this available to you as well. We've read some stories in the past on the show in which it was made explicit that in order to get ahead, certain women and the Fox News organization were to make Roger Ailes' friends happy too, and then they would see the results they want in their own career. I don't know that Harvey Weinstein was distributing people this same way, but I'm sure there were other people taking advantage of it, certainly. I mean, why would young women go to work for Harvey Weinstein? Because of, I assume, enormous amounts of money that he was paying them in order to be a part of his sex trafficking operation. Why would young men, if they were interested, go to work? Or mid-level executives, or even high-powered executives, they thought they might get a taste of the same thing too. Or if Harvey can get away with it, so can I. And similarly at Fox, Bill O'Reilly types, and Eric Bolling, who was the latest of the people being accused. And just as I said in Breitbart and the alt-right, it was even more explicit that if you joined up, there was the possibility that you could get tied into this system, whether at Trump, the Trump organization, or at Breitbart. We can hook you up with the ability to do this same thing. And, of course, over at Breitbart, it came along with ideological confirmation that this was your right. As a white male, you were entitled to be able to be sexually dominant over anybody you wanted. And this was the way it was supposed to be, and right and proper. And even if you were, even for Milo Yiannopoulos, if you're gay and involved in this, right? It didn't even exclude or make itself exclusive to heterosexual orientation, which you would think that ultra-conservatives would. But, of course, alt-right, they'd throw all the old stuff out the window. And, look, they were gimmitarian. As long as they could get what they wanted, they were happy to do it. All right. Let's see. There's more to it, of course, but I think maybe it is time probably for us to move on from this, besides which it has come to be time for our next break coming up. Let's see. We can shift to another major topic of the weekend, still more about Trump-Russia, about Russia, about Russian hacking, about their use of social media platforms. showing up in surprising places, using our online systems against us in surprising ways. We've got a lot to catch up on that, plus a couple other random stories as well, including this one from Forbes magazine about the mystery of Wilbur Ross's missing billions. Apparently, he found a way to hide some $2 billion of assets during his confirmation process and convince everybody that he was worth considerably less so that you wouldn't be able to see his conflicts of interest ahead of time. Very interesting story. We'll talk more about it after the break. Welcome back now to Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I teased you at the beginning, or heading into the break, about the mystery of Wilbur Ross's missing billions. I realize now, of course, there's a couple other stories that I really wanted to get to that I could probably use every moment for. But because I mentioned it, the mystery of Wilbur Ross's missing billions, you'll recall, of course, Wilbur Ross, in case you've forgotten, is the Secretary of Commerce and for the owner as well at the time of the big disaster of the Sago mine, thanks to Donald Trump for helping all the coal miners of America by putting the guy in charge of the biggest, baddest mining disaster of recent years at the head of the Department of Commerce. I'm sure it's going to work out just great. But he was also lying about his money. Let's just at least get the lead on this thing. Starts out this way. Dan Alexander reporting for Forbes. Dressed in a blue suit and red tie. How could you possibly be dressed in anything else in this administration? Donald Trump's 79-year-old pick for Secretary of Commerce sat before a panel of senators for nearly 4 hours in January, deflecting dozens of questions with relative ease. When one legislator at the confirmation hearing asked Wilbur Ross how he would ensure that his official actions did not create conflicts of interest, given his vast personal holdings, Ross left little room for criticism. And that was the idea. I intend to be quite scrupulous about recusal and any topic where it is the slightest scintilla of doubt, he said. What he left unsaid, however, because that's a good answer, if you believe it, was that between the November election and January inauguration, he had quietly moved a chunk of assets into trusts for his family members, leaving more than $2 billion off of his financial disclosure report, and therefore out of the public eye. Now, that guy is interesting. He hid from view more money than most people have to disclose, even if you're a billionaire, and he hid it, and he had, of course, still more on the record. Imagine being a billionaire, and this guy says, I have hidden more money than you actually have in the past 2 months. That's amazing. Ross revealed the existence of those assets and the timing of the transfer when Forbes asked why his financial disclosure form listed fewer assets than he had previously told the magazine he owned. The hidden assets raised questions about whether the Secretary of Commerce, of all things, violated federal rules and whether his family owns billions in holdings that could create the appearance of conflicts of interest. The answer, of course, is yes. Federal law requires incoming cabinet members to disclose assets they currently own, as well as any that produced income during the current and previous calendar years, even if they no longer own the assets. Ross says he followed all the rules, but how could someone apparently hold $2 billion in assets without producing big income that would show up on a financial disclosure report raises more questions than it answers. 3 months before the 2016 election, Ross's assistant described his portfolio to Forbes as a mix that would theoretically throw off plenty of cash, $1.3 billion of municipal bonds, $1.3 billion worth of interests in general and limited partnerships, $550 million of equities, $225 million of art, $180 million in cash, and $120 million worth of real estate. That adds up to $3.7 billion. Last year, Forbes asked for documentation to prove the existence of those assets, received nothing in return, and ultimately estimated Ross's fortune at a more conservative $2.9 billion for its annual Forbes 400 list of the richest Americans, published in October. This year, the Secretary of Commerce said he would dig up a breakdown of the assets he transferred into trusts, but he never sent anything. It's unclear whether he cited accurate figures either year. Ross gave some clues about the structure of those trusts. I'm not the beneficiary of them. He said, that's the point. This is set up for children and things like that. People like that? He says things. Are his children the only beneficiaries? Well, yes. Well, and some third parties. Who are the third parties? It's a complicated story, but there are children from former marriages, things like that are not actually my children, but who are beneficiaries. His wife's 2 children? No, others. We've both had a couple of marriages, as you probably know. He said no one outside of his family is a beneficiary of those trusts, but he didn't answer more than a dozen follow-up questions, including how many trusts there are, whether he can reclaim the assets after he leaves government, and whether the trusts could pay him income in the future. Walter Schaub, whose name you've heard quite a bit these past couple of months, and who resigned as the director of the U.S. Office of Government Ethics in July, said the rules governing a particular trust are key to understanding whether an official has to disclose the entire trust or just the assets that produced income shortly before they were transferred out of the filer's hands. If someone were to divert an asset by giving it away, it's important that that asset never wind up back in the donor's hands again. If at some point in the future that person ends up with that asset again, it's going to look like it was a sham divestiture. It was. 2 trust attorneys expressed doubt that Ross suddenly made a clean transfer of more than $2 billion to his family, a move that could trigger gift taxes of $800 million or more. Such a move would be especially perplexing, they said, since the Trump administration had proposed easing the tax burden on transfers between generations. If the estate tax goes away, said Donald Hamburg, a New York City-based trusts and estates attorney, then why would you pay a lot of money to get property out of your estate to save estate taxes? Ross again said he followed all tax rules. It is possible that he transferred some of the assets to his family members years ago. He initially told Forbes that he transferred assets into trust shortly after the November 8th election, but in a later email he hinted that some of the assets may have belonged to his family members previously. My personal financial affairs have been complex for a number of years, not just one, he wrote. The rough estimates used by Forbes for many years were based on a broad definition of family assets. Now, there's a bit more to it, of course, but the basics of it, I kind of like the fact here is that he's caught between his need to brag to Forbes magazine in prior years before he was in government about how rich he was so that he would be ranked highly in the Forbes 400 list, and his need to minimize those assets in the face of his financial disclosure needs and tax pressures. But also, on the other hand, if he really believed in the administration's program of reducing those tax pressures, he wouldn't have to restructure those assets or wouldn't have paid so much money to restructure those assets in the first place. So he's caught between 3 different rocks and hard places in this one. And it's amazing what billionaire egos will bring you to do. They're so interested in looking like the richest person in the world, and then when it's suddenly not advantageous to look like you're super rich, they're not exactly pleading poverty, but trying to hide assets on top of all that. Anyway, a different kind of story. Thought that was interesting. Wanted to throw that out there because the number of cabinet secretaries getting themselves in trouble with private flights and the like, and he wasn't showing up on that roster. We just figured that there was something else going on. And so it was true. There was. Now, to shift gears one more time to see if I can fit in as much of this story as possible. And I do have many other things I want to get to, but we've got an entire week to get to them. And if the noise continues like today into tomorrow, we may do well with a pre-recorded show and catching up on some of these stories and some of the listener submissions. I say user submissions because I'm used to the blog world, although I've been doing this radio show for 1,000 years already. But lots of good contributions that I want to catch up on as well. But first, I feel like I have to get to this one. The basic, best underlying use of Russian use of technology and the social media web that is out there, and there's a lot of writing on it, is one you may have seen in The Atlantic. Alexis Madrigal writing this piece, widely shared, widely commented on over the weekend, what Facebook did to American democracy and why it was so hard to see it coming. Lots of recapping of good points, but also some developments of some very interesting new ones, I think. We'll see if we can get to them all in here. In the media world, As in so many other realms, there is a sharp discontinuity in the timeline before the 2016 election and after. Things we thought we understood, narratives, data, software, news events, have had to be reinterpreted in light of Donald Trump's surprising win, if it was in fact a win, as well as the continuing questions about the role that misinformation and disinformation played in his election. Fine. Tech journalists covering Facebook had a duty to cover what was happening before, during, and after the election. Reporters tried to see past their often liberal political orientations and the unprecedented actions of Donald Trump to see how 2016 was playing out on the internet. Every component of the chaotic digital campaign has been reported on here at The Atlantic and elsewhere. Facebook's enormous distribution power for political information, rapacious partisanship reinforced by distinct media information spheres, the increasing scourge of viral, quote-unquote viral hoaxes and other kinds of misinformation that could propagate through those networks, and the Russian Information Ops Agency. But no one delivered the synthesis that could have tied together all of these disparate threads. It's not that this hypothetical perfect story would have changed the outcome of the election. The real problem for all political stripes, maybe, is understanding the set of conditions that led to Trump's victory. The informational underpinnings of democracy have been eroded, and no one has explained precisely how. It's an ambitious topic, right? We've known since at least 2012 that Facebook was a powerful, non-neutral force in electoral politics. In that year, a combined University of California, San Diego and Facebook research team led by James Fowler published a study in Nature which argued that Facebook's I voted button had driven a small but measurable increase in turnout, primarily among young people. Rebecca Rosen's 2012 story, Did Facebook Give Democrats the Upper Hand?, relied on new research from Fowler et al. About the presidential election that year. Again, the conclusion of their work was that Facebook's get out the vote message could have driven a substantial chunk of increase in youth voter participation in the 2012 general election. Fowler told Rosen that it was, quote, even possible that Facebook is completely responsible for the youth voter increase. And because a higher proportion of young people vote Democratic than the general population, the net effect of Facebook's GOTV effort would have been to help the Dems. The research showed that a small design change by Facebook could have electoral repercussions, especially with America's electoral college format, in which a few hotly contested states have a disproportionate impact on the national outcome. And the pro-liberal effect it implied became enshrined as an axiom of how campaign staffers, reporters, and academics viewed social media. In June of 2014, Harvard law scholar Jonathan Zittrain wrote an essay in New Republic called Facebook Could Decide an Election Without Anyone Ever Finding Out, in which he called attention to the possibility of Facebook selectively depressing voter turnout. He also suggested that Facebook be seen as an information fiduciary, interesting term, charged with certain special roles and responsibilities because it controls so much personal data. We'll have to think about that one. In late 2014, the Daily Dot called attention to an obscure Facebook-produced case study on how strategists defeated a statewide measure in Florida by relentlessly focusing Facebook ads on Broward and Dade counties, Democratic strongholds. Working with a tiny budget that would have allowed them to send a single mailer to just 150,000 households, the digital advertising firm Chong and Koster was able to obtain remarkable results. Where the Facebook ads appeared, we did almost 20 percentage points better than where they didn't, testified a leader of the firm. Within that area, the people who saw the ads were 17% more likely to vote our way than the people who didn't. Within that group, the people who voted the way we wanted them to, when asked why, often cited the messages they learned from the Facebook ads. In April of 2016, Rob Meyer published How Facebook Could Tilt the 2016 Election, after a company meeting in which some employees apparently put the stopping Trump question to Mark Zuckerberg. Based on Fowler's research, Meyer reimagined Zittrain's hypothetical as a direct Facebook intervention to depress turnout among non-college graduates who leaned Trump as a whole. Facebook, of course, said it would never do such a thing. Voting is a core value of democracy, and we believe that supporting civic participation is an important contribution we can make to the community, a spokesperson said, and they probably meant that, right? We as a company are neutral. We have not and will not use our product in a way that attempts to influence how people vote. They wouldn't do it intentionally, at least. As all these examples show, though, the potential for Facebook to have an impact on an election was clear for at least half a decade before Donald Trump was elected. True, we do forget that, right? But rather than focusing specifically on the integrity of elections, most writers, myself included, Alexis says, some observers like Sasha Eisenberg, Zeynep Tufekci, and Daniel Kreis accepted. Most writers bundled electoral problems inside other broader concerns like privacy, surveillance, tech ideology, media industry competition, or the psychological effects of social media. The same was true even of people inside Facebook. If you'd come to me in 2012, when the last presidential election was raging and we were cooking up ever more complicated ways to monetize Facebook data, and told me that Russian agents in the Kremlin's employ would be buying Facebook ads to subvert American democracy, I'd have asked you where your tinfoil hat was, wrote Antonio Garcia Martinez, who managed ad targeting for Facebook back then, and yet now we live in that otherworldly political reality. Not to excuse us, but this was back on the old earth, too, when electoral politics was not the thing that every single person talked about all the time. There were other important dynamics to Facebook's growing power that needed to be covered. Facebook's draw is its ability to give you what you want. Here's where it becomes important. We all know this to be the case, but I think this is put very well here. Facebook's draw is its ability to give you what you want. That's their product, you see. Like a page, if you like it, like use the like button, you'll get more of that page's posts. Like a story, get more stories like that. Interact with a person, get more of their updates. The way Facebook determines the rankings of the news feed is the probability that you'll like, comment on, or share a story. Engagement, of course, I'm going to insert this. Engagement, user engagement is their product. That's their metric. More engaged it gets users, the better they like it, and the more often they'll serve it. And the whole point of their algorithm is finding out who will like what so that engagement happens. Back to the reporting here. The way Facebook determines the ranking of the newsfeed is the probability that you'll like, comment on, or share a story. Shares are worth more than comments, which are both worth more than likes. But in all cases, the more likely you are to interact with the post, the higher up it will be shown in your newsfeed. 2,000 kinds of data, or features in the industry parlance, get smelted in Facebook's machine learning system to make those predictions. What's crucial to understand is that from the system's perspective, success is correctly predicting what you'll like, comment on, or share. That is what matters. People call this engagement. There are other factors, as Slate's Will Aramis noted in this rare story about the newsfeed ranking team. It's linked herein. You'll read it later. But who knows how much weight they actually receive and for how long as the system evolves. For example, one change that Facebook highlighted to Aramis in early 2016, taking into account how long people look at a story, even if they don't click it, was subsequently dismissed by Lars Backstrom, the VP of Engineering in charge of newsfeed ranking, as a noisy signal that's also biased in a few ways, making it hard to use in a May 2017 technical talk. Facebook's engineers do not want to introduce noise into the system. Because the newsfeed, this machine for generating engagement, is Facebook's most important technical system. Their success predicting what you'll like is why users spend an average of more than 50 minutes a day on the site, and why even the former creator of the like button worries about how well the site captures attention. Newsfeed works really well And apparently that's what's worrying him. But as far as personalized newspapers go, this one's editorial sensibilities are limited. Most people are far less likely to engage with viewpoints that they find confusing, annoying, incorrect, or abhorrent. And this is true not just in politics, but in the broader culture. That this could be a problem was apparent to many. Remember this one? Eli Pariser's The Filter Bubble, which came out in the summer of 2011, became the most widely cited distillation of the effects Facebook and other internet platforms could have on public discourse. Pariser began the book research when he noticed conservative people whom he'd befriended on the platform despite his left-leaning politics had disappeared from his newsfeed. I was still clicking my progressive friends' links more than my conservative friends, and links to the latest Lady Gaga videos more than either, he wrote. So, no conservative links for me. In other words, the algorithm filtered out the people that weren't creating engagement with him. I still like those people. They're still friends of mine. But it's not being served up to me because what they serve is conservative. And though I may or may not even agree or think there's some value, I'm not liking, clicking, engaging, sharing. But I am sharing my liberal friend stuff. And eventually the machine just says, that's all this guy wants. Or at least that's all I care about giving him because that creates the engagement. And the conservative stuff doesn't. Filter bubble. Through the book, he traces the many potential problems that the personalization of media might bring. Most germane to this discussion, he raised the point that if every one of the billion news feeds is different, how can anyone understand what other people are seeing and responding to? The most serious political problem posed by filter bubbles is that they make it increasingly difficult to have a public argument. As the number of different segments and messages increases, it becomes harder and harder for the campaigns to track who's saying what to whom, Pariser wrote. How does a political campaign know what its opponent is saying if ads are only targeted to white Jewish men between 28 and 34 who have expressed a fondness for U2 on Facebook and who donated to Barack Obama's campaign? This indeed did become an enormous problem. When I was editor-in-chief of Fusion, we set about trying to track the digital campaign with several dedicated people. What we quickly realized was that there was both too much data, the noisiness of all the different posts by the various candidates and their associates, as well as too little. Targeting made tracking the actual messaging that campaigns were paying for impossible to track. So I view it as a sort of a different, but yes, related problem. On Facebook, the campaigns could show ads only to the people they targeted. We couldn't actually see the messages that were actually reaching people in battleground areas. From the outside, it was a technical impossibility to know what ads were running on Facebook, one that the company had fought to keep intact. Pariser suggests in his book, one simple solution to this problem would simply be to require campaigns to immediately disclose all of their online advertising materials and to whom each ad is targeted, which could happen in future campaigns. Imagine if this had happened in 2016. If there were data sets of all the ads the campaigns and others had run, we'd know a lot more about what actually happened last year. The filter bubble is obviously prescient work, but there was one thing that Pariser and most other people did not foresee, and that's that Facebook became completely dominant as a media distributor. I'm going to stop for the day there, I think, because there's an awful lot to discuss, and we'll never get through all of the rest of it. But I think some of the key points were in that last section. One, the idea of personalized newspapers, filter bubble, however you want to put it, right? There's no commonality of news, and you know how that manifests itself. There's no longer any common understanding of what establishes the factual universe anymore. You have people on television denying that Donald Trump ever admitted to anything or did anything that even remotely could be described as sexual assault in the Weinstein sense, even though that's obviously true that he did, and we all remember these things. There's a certain segment of the population that will perceive this as untrue, not necessarily because of their partisanship directly, but indirectly because of their partisanship. In other words, their partisanship drives them to like and refrain from liking or engaging with certain content on Facebook. If they are living in the Facebook world, or the social media world and getting their information through this filter bubble thing, it might not even be a conscious decision. It might be somebody who hates the idea or is worried about the idea of filter bubbles, like Eli Pariser, but he comes to the realization that what he likes and dislikes in the algorithm affects what he sees. And he's conscious of it. Millions more people are not going to be necessarily conscious of it, even though they're conscious of liking and sharing certain kinds of material. If you get all your news from Facebook, and increasingly there are more and more people who do, and unfortunately they tend to be people who get all their news from Facebook and don't look any further, like don't see news stories and go, that's intriguing, I want to check on it. Smart people do that. Unfortunately, the time-pressed and the dumb will tend to get all their news, I think, from Facebook. And it might not even be a conscious thing. Like I said, if you sign on and you get all your news and you're bombarded all day long with Hillary Clinton is a mass murderer, Hillary Clinton is a pedophile, Hillary Clinton is a whatever, all the horrible, awful fake news about her or whoever, right? If that's all you're getting and you're not checking into this stuff necessarily, you just live in a media environment where this kind of thing is being said all the time, eventually it filters into your brain like, I don't know whether any of this is true. I'm not even actually really interested in this. All I know is everyone's saying it. Literally everywhere I go, I'm confronted with this. There must be something to this somewhere. And even if you never check it out, you become convinced that it is true until somebody feeds you a line that triggers you and you say, I keep hearing this. This must be so. And of course, nobody could possibly run for president and just stand up there and lie their ass off all the time, right? That can't be true. And we fall into this same trap. But in addition to all of this, they may not even know that they're reinforcing it themselves by the way they interact on social media. In addition to all that, layered on top of all of that is, of course, not only is there no commonality of fact and commonality of news, but some portion of it is specifically, purposefully hidden from us. These dark posts, which really seem ominous and wrong to me, especially looking backwards on all this. But you could see how it would start out kind of almost innocently, although I don't know about the dark part, but the targeting, certainly. I'm going to advertising is always about targeting. You want to always be working to narrow your target and do it more efficiently. But if you're being charged by the number of people to whom an ad is displayed, you're certainly also going to want to use some factors to help filter out wasteful spending, essentially, and that's probably how dark posting began. I don't want to show it to people who are not going to be receptive to it, but who might otherwise end up in my model based on positive aspects only. But if I can identify negative aspects, well then fine. I don't want to waste money displaying to them. And that eventually gets perverted into dark posts. Like, I don't want anyone who could use this against me by revealing to the rest of the world how disgusting I am to see this. And it becomes something completely different. I thought that was a fascinating section of the article. I was fascinated by the rest of the article, too. It's just that we won't have time to get to it. Here's where we have to sign off for the day and hand things over to the guys getting ready to bring you the after show and back clean up on all of the news of the day that we didn't get to. And there's so much. And, we should have some exciting shows coming up in the rest of the week. And, of course, we'll get to some of our user contributions, listener contributions as well. Definitely want to get those out there. Here's what's coming up next, though, because you're going to waste the rest of your day here on Netroots Radio, right? I encourage you to do so. Why? Because it's not wasteful. It's educational. You don't even think you're learning. That's the best way, I'd say. So tell your friends that you're wasting your time just having fun, but come out smarter than ever before. Here's how you can do it. Stay tuned for Metaphor Monday. On the after show, here's what they've got coming up for you. An Idaho grandfather is killed by a doomsday prepper deputy in a bull euthanasia gone awry. Holy mackerel, I can't believe I missed that one. A federal judge rules Texas Governor Greg Abbott was wrong to remove an atheist group's winter solstice display from the Capitol grounds. I think we all knew that was coming. That's really a no-brainer, but it takes a federal judge to get that done in Texas. And Colin Kaepernick has filed a grievance under the NFL collective bargaining agreement, accusing the league's owners of collusion in not hiring him. He's right there as well. On the last half, they report that the religious right is using hurricane tragedies to leverage more public funds in a cynical bid at undoing the First Amendment. Yuck.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
There's more coming up on the last half, and this will be important if you were fascinated by the Facebook story the same way I was. Here's news. Facebook appears to be blocking access to data for reporters investigating Russian infiltration during the 2016 election. I have more for you on that tomorrow as well. Thanks for listening through all the noise.